Welcome to today's show, Success and Intentional Lifestyle. I'm your host, Jeff Heiser, a motivator, a leader, and a communicator. Welcome, and thank you for joining me here today on Success and Intentional Lifestyle. I'm your host, Jeff Heiser, and I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited about today's show. Before we get started, I want to remind you to check out my website at Jeff Heiser Radio, www.jeffheiserradio.com, and my official Facebook page at facebook.com/Jeff Heiser Radio. And you'll find lots of good information out there and the upcoming guests that I'll have on the show. Also, while you're out there, please like my Facebook page. If you'd like to join in on today's conversation, you can call in at 321-631-1300, and I'll try to get you on the show. As the title goes, the show goes, Success and Intentional Lifestyle. And you know, the only way you can be successful is to be intentional about it. I'm so thankful you've joined me here again today, and I hope you had a great week and that you're looking forward to a great show. You know, today is the July 4th, the Independence Day for the United States. It's a day that commemorates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence signed by our forefathers on July 4th, 1776. On that date, the United States declared its independence and separated from Great Britain. You know, I cannot think of a more intentional act than declaring your independence and freedom. For just a moment, think about how different life would be if this one intentional act by our forefathers had never happened. It would be a very different world. You know, today, my special guest, I want to get right to it. My special guest today lives a very intentional life, and I'm really very happy to have her on my show today. My guest today is Dr. Dorothy Guy Von Villain. And she's a coach, she's a speaker, she's a trainer. She works in personal and professional growth and development, transformational leadership, and cross-cultural competence. Her mission is to add value to others and help individuals find their purpose in order to reach their maximum potential. I'm going to call her Dr. Dorothy because that's what I call her. So Dr. Dorothy is a certified coach with John Maxwell team. She's a keynote speaker and a workshop facilitator. Her programs are designed to take people, their teams or organizations in a desired direction to achieve their short and long-term goals. The most important part, and the reason why I asked Dr. Dorothy to be on the show today, is she has a passion to serve the military community as, and what she calls it, and I quote, a voice of wisdom for military wives. She draws upon 45 years of experience as a military spouse to guide women and families on how to intentionally move from surviving to thriving in a constantly changing environment of the military lifestyle. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Her newly released book, Loving Your Life, 7 Steps for Military Wives, offers practical steps of success in 7 key areas of life, and it's available on Amazon. And she has a children's book, Wally Goes to School. It's geared towards children ages 7 to 11 and their parents and teachers and mentors. And it introduces life skills and foundational principles for these young people and offers a growth plan for them to start at a very early age. This book you can get on grandpanion.com. Dr. Dorothy earned a PhD in Educational Administration and International Education from American University in Washington, D.C., and she has published works that include Traditional Handicrafts of Oman, which is printed both in English and Arabic, Loving Your Life, 7 Steps for Military Wives, and Wally Goes to School, as well as articles published in many various professional journals. Welcome, Dr. Dorothy, and thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you, Jeff. I am honored to be here, and particularly on America's Independence Day.
You know, today for me is a special day. not only is it July 4th, but today is the day I have my first guest on the show, which is you. And I could not think of a more special person to have as my first guest than you, Dr. Dorothy. I really can't. From the first time I met you, and you said that you were a voice of wisdom for military wives, I said, I have to talk more to this lady.
Well, the first time I met you and you shared your story with me, Jeff, in fact, I don't know if you remember the first time we actually connected, but one of my favorite sayings, is, and I teach this to others, is that there are no coincidences. It's God's way of remaining anonymous. And I don't know if you recall, but I was going to get on a mentorship call to listen to Paul Martinelli, the president of the John Maxwell team. And I called in a little bit early. I was going to see if I could connect and ask Paul a question. And this male voice was on the other end of the line, and I asked if it was Paul, and you said no, it was Jeff Heiser. And I said, where are you? You said, I'm in Florida. And you were the only voice, several hundred people often get on those calls, but at that moment in time, 10 minutes before the call was to start, you were the only voice there. And I remember saying, well, okay, I'll just call back in a little bit. And you said, no, don't go. And we started talking, and that was the beginning of our connection. And I do not think that was by accident.
No, I remember that. I remember that really well. For my listeners, Dr. Dorothy is out in Phoenix or Tucson?
I'm in the Tucson area.
Tucson area. Are you on a speakerphone by any chance?
Yes. Do you need me to go off
Yeah.
speaker?
Can you just go to regular? It's. I think we'll have a little bit better luck on some of the sound.
Okay. Does that sound better?
Yes, much better. And you know, I do remember that, and that's kind of the way I am. And can you tell us a little bit about what you do out there in Tucson?
Yeah, I started out. I was working for the military's culture center, and we were developing cultural awareness curriculum and training the trainers across the Army in cultural awareness, which I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed doing that work. But I've always had this longing to actually create something on my own, and to do something on my own. And I joined the John Maxwell team, and I really began my growth journey. Really began, and you would think it began in my doctoral work, which it did, and I learned a lot. But when I joined the John Maxwell team and I became part of this global group of entrepreneurs who were making things happen around the world and doing incredible things, I began to think in terms of, it's either now or never, because, I'm not in my 20s or 30s anymore. I have 45 years experience as a military spouse. And I just asked myself, did I have the guts and the courage to step out there and create something on my own? So I hired a coach, and I've worked with my coach for a year, and through that process, I realized that the best service I could give and where I had the most value to bring to the table would be to serve military families, because it was my experience. So I began to I developed my own company, Dr. Dorothy Guy Von Villain, LLC, and I began to work on developing content and leading masterminds and workshops. It's evolved over the last 2 years, and I now I have a television program in Tucson, Access Tucson, and the title of that is Military Wives Serving Those Who Serve. So it's really expanded. I finished my book, Loving Your Life, 7 Steps for Military Wives that you mentioned.
Right.
And that's out in Kindle, and it's also available in print version now on Amazon.
So let me...
And then I developed this program for the children as well, because I think it's so important, Jeff.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Early on, to really teach them leadership principles and how to develop a growth plan and have a purpose and intention for their life from an early age.
Right. a lot of us have read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey, and you know, in that book, he teaches that you begin with an end in mind, and we in our field we learn that you want to begin with the end in mind. What is it that you're trying to achieve through the work you're doing? What is that end goal that you're trying to get to?
I want to help military families, and it's not, you know, what I'm writing here. Let me just make this clarification: is the content that I'm developing. You know, I'm focused on military families because it's my life, but it's really valuable information, very practical tools and information for anyone. You know, they don't have to be military to really get value from this. My end goal is to help these families bloom where they're planted. Because the life, you know, it's very transitory. You know, you're constantly changing. You're on the move. About the time you begin to feel rooted somewhere, you're uprooted, and you have to go, and the cycle starts all over again. So as I asked myself, where can I add the most value, I realized that this lifestyle I've identified 2 things that I think really define military families. One of them is that, and I always try to put something, as an educator, I try to put something into a framework, you know, give something a framework that we can hang things on.
Right.
And so I looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, you know, the very basic human needs are physiological needs, and military families basically have those met, as do, you know, most families, but not all. And until those needs are met, going up the hierarchy of needs doesn't even happen, because you have to meet, you know, for housing, for food, for, you know, the things that we have to have for physical needs.
Right.
But beyond that, the next level is security. And when I start looking at that, and then right above that is belonging. Military families don't have that. That's missing.
No, that's true. We go through a cultural shock when we get someplace, and it's like we don't feel like we belong anyplace.
Yeah, you don't feel like you belong. And about the time, you know, and from my experience, about the time I would begin to feel like maybe I did belong, maybe I could contribute something there. Because, you know, it seems so chaotic, and there's this constant change that goes on. And so you don't feel very secure, and you certainly don't have certainty, because you never know where you're going to go next. You never know exactly when that's going to be, because it could be sooner than you anticipate, and you go wherever the military needs you to go. And oftentimes, as military wives, your husband is deployed or on TDY and gone for an extended period of times. So, you know, there you are. Security is missing. And I'm going to speak more to that. But the other piece of this is connection and significance. Now, these are basic needs that anyone needs across the world. It's not just Americans. It's not just military families. But we all have a need deeply embedded in us for certainty and security, for connection and significance. So as I've really worked my way through this, I'm beginning to realize that's the end goal. That is what I want to do, is help these families realize I want to shorten their learning curve, because it's taken me 40 years to figure this out. So maybe I'm a slow learner, Jeff. I don't know.
well, I want to share something, and I heard you on another interview on another radio station, and I want you only to because it's a really long story, but there was a piece that I heard, and it really struck me, because it happened with my wife and me when we got deployed. We were both in the military, and we got deployed, and when we got to where we were deployed, we basically stood there and just about cried. But you talk about this. And it painted such a picture in my head when you got off the plane, and I won't say where. I'll let you talk about that. And you had your 2 young boys with you, and you were like, holy smokes, what did I just step into?
Absolutely.
Could you talk a little bit about that, because that seems like that's part of what is really driving you, because you really kind of understood that piece after a while and wanted to share that. It seems like. Can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. And it is. It was a turning point for me. But what I didn't, and here's one of the reasons that I am so driven. I'm so driven in what I'm doing, and I'm so passionate about it. Is this was my turning point, but I didn't understand how it fit into the larger puzzle until much later, as I have really learned to be intentional, as I've learned the power of reflection and really, thinking back and seeing, okay, what did I learn from that? What were the lessons? How would I do it differently? So on this particular instance, we had been, it was our first overseas posting as a family, and we actually originally had orders for, so here's some of the uncertainty and insecurity. We actually had orders for Hawaii, which, I was pretty happy
much
about.
different place.
Yeah. And he comes in one day and says, well, they've pulled my orders. We're not going to Hawaii. We're going to go to Saudi Arabia.
Holy smokes.
Now, let me set the stage, okay? This was 1980. And it was in the midst of the Iran hostage crisis. And a lot of our listeners may be too young to really understand or remember what that was all about. But in essence, the American embassy in Tehran had been taken over by Iranian students, and they had taken 60 American hostages, and they held them for 444 days. Now, think about that. That's over a year that American hostages were being held in Iran.
Yeah, several of those guys I went to school with, actually, to the special training. Yeah.
Have you gotten to talk to them since?
No, it's been very difficult. I've had to work through my own issues.
Yeah, I know you have. You have an incredible story as well. Well, that's a stage. That's what was going on, and of course, we get these orders to go next door, to Saudi Arabia. And at that time, Americans knew very little about that region of the world. I knew absolutely nothing other than fear and the very, very negative perceptions about the region that were coming through the news, based on this hostage crisis. I grew up in Texas, with very, very deep Texas roots. And the boys and I and they were 8 and 9 years old at the time. We had just been home to Texas to see family and friends before we left to go overseas. And I was very, very close to my birth family and grew up in one place with deep roots, so I had lifelong friends there that was also so difficult to leave. And my parents, we had left them behind in this flight. We right before we flew, we left them in tears, Jeff.
Oh man, I know how that works.
Yeah, you know how that works. They were heartbroken, and and even more than being heartbroken that we were going so far away, they were in great fear of what might happen to us in that region. And they had begged me not to go. And as we were flying over to Saudi Arabia, I'll never forget, my heart just broke too. I mean, I just sat there with tears in my own eyes, thinking about seeing my parents in such distress at telling us goodbye. And throughout the flight, I couldn't help but think about, oh my God, I'm really not sure I shouldn't have stayed back. I'm not sure I should take our boys in here. I had no idea what to expect. But all of these things were going through my mind, and my heart was breaking for leaving family and friends. And I'll never forget, as the plane landed, we landed in Tehran, and we did not pull up to the terminal that day. The plane stopped short of the terminal, and you had to deplane onto the tarmac. And when they opened that door of the plane, this searing heat met us, just worse than the Houston humidity. We just hit like a hot oven, and it was almost as though a natural reaction to think, I don't want to take this air into my lungs. And in a larger sense, it was the whole experience of being so fearful and so uncertain and feeling unsafe and insecure. So all of this was going on, and I'll never forget, as we started down the plane, the steps of the plane, I was holding each boy, with each hand on each side of me. And I'll never forget our little 9-year-old. I looked down at him, and he was looking up at me, searching my face for reassurance that we were going to be okay, because they could sense my fear. And, they'd heard news as well.
Right. They don't miss it.
And I was so reluctant. Everything just seemed surreal. I was so reluctant to go forward. But you know how your mind will sort of play tricks on you when you're in a very fearful place.
Yes. You either want to run or you're going to fight it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it fight or flight?
Right.
And my tendency was to want to just run and hide. I was petrified.
Get back on the plane and go home.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but I was trying to appear brave for our boys. And I'll never forget Trey looking up at me, and he was just searching my face for some kind of reassurance. And, I smiled. I tried to look like I was brave, but I really wanted to just run and hide. But as I looked down at the base of those steps, it was like a wall of fire. And so I'm right now I'm working on my story and the larger story, but this is sort of the turning point for me and my story is this wall of fire. And as I saw this wall of fire, I realized that it was my test. I felt fear, I felt homesick, but I realized that this was my test.
We all
and
get tested.
I had to take that last step, or there was no turning back.
Yeah, we all get tested that way somehow, some way. We do. We all come up to a point where we're going to be tested somehow. And
absolutely.
And it's like what Les Brown says all the time. It's not what you do when you get knocked down. It's what you do when you get back up from it. Right?
Uh-huh.
It's what how you respond to it. So I want to pick this back up right after the break. We're getting close to the break. We got about a minute or so, 2 minutes left. So I want to pick that back up. So everybody keep that on your mind. But I want to ask you about something that you said real briefly to take us to the break. You said that you work intentionally to take people from surviving to thriving. And
absolutely.
Can you
absolutely and it really a lot of it has to do with awareness.
We got 1 minute for that. We got 1 minute for that until the break.
A lot of it has to do with raising their awareness that yes, these things are missing in the military lifestyle, but you have to once you're aware that they're missing, you have to be just like Les Brown said. It's what you do when you get up, and so if you accept that those things are missing, and you're going to create your own security. And you're going to create your own connection and significance by being intentional, then that's going to be the difference maker. And that's how you're going to move from surviving to thriving. And I'm developing content around that every day right now.
Thank you, Dr. Dorothy. Please join us back on the second half when we get to talk about the Wall of Fire with Dr. Dorothy Von Villain. We're back. This is Success and Intentional Lifestyle. I'm your host, Jeff Heiser, and if you missed the first part of the show, go to the archives. I've had my guest, Dr. Dorothy Von Villain, and we've been talking about a lot of things about walls of fire, about facing your fears, about military life. And I want to ask Dr. Dorothy a question, and I hope you will agree. Will you come back and we'll dedicate one whole show to the Wall of Fire?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to.
I would like to do that. I don't think we could do justice to it in the second half. And there's so many other things I want to talk to you about. So I would love to invite you back, and we'll dedicate a whole show to the Wall of Fire where we talk about facing fears. And
yes.
And I think it's so important that people hear some of what you have to say about that, because personally, my wife and I we experienced it. My son, my son-in-law, my daughter, we've all experienced what you talked about. What I'd like to spend a little bit of time on in the second half is I want to talk about your book, Loving Your Life, 7 Steps of Military Wives. And I love your tagline, a voice of wisdom for military wives and those who love them. And my wife, she was a military wife, but she was also a military active duty at the same time. And talk about challenges. Holy smokes. And I want to know what do you see as the biggest challenge for military wives and their families today? As you look out and you work with these women and their families, what do you see as their biggest challenge?
The biggest one that they express to me, Jeff, particularly in today's environment, because women, so many women are in the workforce and they're career oriented. So that's more or less the biggest challenge that women have expressed to me who are within the military service, unless they are active duty. Is they ask me, how do I get a job when people know that you're only going to be there for 2 or 3 years and then you're going to be uprooted and you're going to be gone? They don't want to invest in you. They don't want to take the time for training and that sort of thing because you're going to be gone.
Right.
So, what do I do about that? And so, again, I'm raising awareness. As I've gotten deeper into this and I've talked with more military wives and families, I'm beginning to realize, and through my own entrepreneurial experience over the last 2 years, the entrepreneurial mindset is really a mind shift. And what I believe can best serve our military families and answer that question is how do I have a career when I'm a military wife supporting my husband?
That's a good question.
I'm beginning to recognize that. Become an entrepreneur. Find out, ask yourself, what is my why? What would I get up for every day and be willing to do? Can't wait to get up and do it. And it's just my passion. I'm passionate about it. I would do it for free if I had to. What is that? And then develop a business around that that's transportable anywhere in the world. It won't matter where the military sends you.
Right. Now, I know that you've gone through that process or some semblance of that process. Can you go through just a little bit about that process, what you went through to find what your purpose was, what your drive, what your why, how you found it?
Yes, I will. And I tell you what, I cannot say enough about the power of coaching in that process. Because I'd never had a coach before, other than, like a coach, as for a team, basketball team in high school, that sort of thing. So I knew the importance of coaches, but I'd never experienced it on a personal level. So I hired this one-on-one coach, and I had to go through a visioning process because I'll never forget my first conversation with him. I said, I have all these things I want to do, but I'm all over the place. And my statement was, I'm just a mess. And he kind of laughed, and he said, you don't come across as a mess. And I said, trust me, I'm a mess because I don't know which direction to take this.
We hide it well, don't we?
Huh?
We hide it well.
Yeah, and most people are there.
Yeah.
I was not alone in this, I know. And so here's the value of going through this visioning process that he took me through. And I'm going to share this with you. This is such a valuable tool. And it's something that I'll certainly be sharing with military families around the world. Is he took me through a visioning process where every morning I had to get up and I had a journal. And journaling, is a very powerful process. Jeff, I'm sure you've gone through
I do.
journals.
I have almost 25 years worth of journals.
Oh, yeah. And it's an amazing process. But it takes discipline. It takes a lot of self-discipline. But every morning I would have to get up, and I would have to write my vision fresh every day. You didn't base it on what you'd written the day before, but I would spend an hour. Some days it would just flow and I could just write, and I would be surprised at what came out of me. And other days it would be a struggle, but I still worked at it on a daily basis. writing my vision. In an ideal world, if I had all the resources I needed, what would this picture look like? And he would push me to great detail, give me details. And as I worked through that process, and I did this for weeks, it was like some days I get up and I think, oh, God, I'm going to do this again.
Not
but when
again.
you have a coach,
Not
they
another
hold you
morning.
accountable.
Yes.
In fact, let me just take a side note here. This is a sidebar. But with my Wally Goes to School leadership book for children, the really powerful piece of that is that it requires a mentor for the child, and it also requires coaching. And the coaching I do, and not only do I coach the child, but I coach the mentors as well.
I gotcha. So let me ask you. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
So let me ask you. So with what you've said so far, the biggest challenge is not only for military wives and families, but for families in general. Then today.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
families need to be doing this. Speaking of Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I don't know if you've ever heard his, I don't remember if he ever made it a book, but I heard him speak in Washington, D.C., and he took those 7 habits of highly effective people and applied it to the family, 7 habits of highly effective families. And this sort of process, if you would sit down together and do it as a family, even once a month, and you would sort of talk about the larger vision, and then what goals would support that vision? Because as I did the coaching, as I went through the visioning process, and let me tell you the other 2 steps because I want people to know this, is that after I wrote it, and you had to write it by hand because of that sort of, your
connection.
neuro
The connection.
Connections that go on between handwritten and your heart.
That's really true, too. That's really, it really works.
It really works. It really works. So I had to handwrite this, and then after a while, after I got clarity around, because that's where I realized that I would serve military wives and families. This came out of this visioning process. I did not have, that was beneath the surface of my awareness when I started the process. That's why it's so powerful.
Wow.
And then after I came to some clarity, and it was so good to feel some clarity around it, then I had to record it into my iPhone, and I would send that to my coach. He would review it. We would talk about it, and then kind of figure out goals and next steps. And then at the end of it, I had to record it and play it back to myself right before I would go to sleep. That's the third step.
That's a process.
Oh, it's a process. And, Jeff, the power in playing it back and your subconscious mind, which is below that level of awareness, here's you describing your vision
for yourself
in great clarity and detail in your own voice.
Wow.
There's nothing more powerful to get clarity on your purpose and your vision.
So how did you go about finding your coach? How did you know what to look for?
Well, I guess I was very blessed in that the John Maxwell team has a world-class group of teachers. The teaching team is incredible, and they teach in different lanes, whether it be business and marketing, whether it be leadership principles, whether it be coaching. Coaching is one of them. And I hired one of the best in the world. I mean, he teaches for the John Maxwell team. He teaches coaching. And I hired him, Christian Simpson, as my personal coach.
Yes, that you got the best. Yes.
Yeah. So that's why I've been able to cover as much ground as I have over this 2-year period. I could never have done it without the help of not only Christian Simpson as my coach, but as this team of entrepreneurs around the world who also, to include you, who pour into your life, who encourage you. Let's talk about the terror barrier for a minute, which is part of that wall of fire. We all have a terror barrier that we have to break through. And, it's like you have these little gremlins that sit on your shoulder, and you start to do something, and you become intentional, and you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. There's that little gremlin saying, "Who do you think you are?
Oh yeah,
you can't do that."
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of stops you. It's very difficult to move through that terror barrier and decide, yes, I will do this, and this is what I'm going to do. And you don't always have to know your how. One of my favorite sayings that I've adopted from Paul Martinelli is jump and grow your wings on the way down. You know, You don't have to have the how. You need to know your why.
Right. You need to take that step. And without taking that step, you'll never know. It's so intentional. You have to take some kind of action to get things started. And I remember when I finally decided it was either going to be my life or I was going to make changes, that I had to be very intentional about it. I had to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to make some changes, and I'm going to be intentional about it. Yeah, it's so with what you've learned and what you've gone through. How do you think that you can use that to impact these challenges of military families and help these people with what you've learned? How do you turn that into what you do?
I'm working right now on content. It'll be like an online course. It'll be available globally, and it'll be based on my 7 steps for military wives. Again, it's not just for military wives and families, and also like my Wally Goes to School series. That's going to be a series. Right now, I have the first book, Wally Goes to School. But my next one, and I'm almost finished with it, is Wally Goes to School and he learns character development. And then there'll be a third in this series on inclusion and diversity and no bullying. I'm okay. You're okay.
Right. So let's really talk a little bit more about Wally. How did you come up with that idea? It's based on my dog, and we had him for 17 years, and I call him my forever dog, and I learned so many things from him, just his way of loving life, and then as I began to learn the leadership principles from John Maxwell's books and other leaders that I began to study, Stephen Covey and many others, I decided, I started out being an elementary teacher, a classroom teacher. That was my first love. And I still love teaching children. And so I began to think, okay, if I can serve military families and wives, then their children are going through the very same struggles, challenges, transitions that I was. And I need to reach out and give content to these kids that teaches them how to be strong and how to be leaders and how to put together a personal growth plan from an early age. And so I targeted, like 3rd grade to 6th grade, because that's a very, very important period in elementary education. And so I began to write it based on, a lot of the things that I had read. One of the best books on learning to really grow as, personal growth and development is Maxwell's The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. Oh, that's a good book.
And I had been studying that for myself, and so I began to think, okay, how can I bring that down to elementary level and put it into leadership principles that would be valuable for children, write it into a fun story, because it's really fun. It's not a hard copy. It's digital. And the reason it's digital is because I want it universally available, but it also is interactive. And so I have little videos that come on at the beginning of each chapter, and I tell them what to look for. Different leadership.
Yeah. I was with my grandson. He's 4.5, and I was watching him go through something like that. It's amazing. He picks up the iPad. He goes right to it. He goes right through these things, and it's like, holy smokes! I didn't even know what a computer was then. Yeah. And
it has embedded sounds in it.
Yeah.
I can say like Wally howls, and you click on a little thing, and it woo woo woo. So it's fun. It's fun for kids, but it has really important leadership principles and personal growth tools from an early age, and it requires them to work with either a parent, a grandparent, which is why it's on grandpanion.com, because that connects grandparents with grandchildren, parents with grandchildren, parents with children, teachers, mentors. It requires mentors and coaching.
Right.
And so that's built in there, and that's why I've placed it on grandcanyon.com. It's a great website.
Okay, so
And,
Wally
and there are other books there, too, for youngsters.
So Wally Goes to School can be, you can get it at grandcanyon.com. And what about your other book? Where can people get that?
On Amazon. Go to Amazon and just put in Loving Your Life, 7 Steps for Military Wives, or my name. And it's right there on Amazon, and it's also on Kindle.
Fantastic. So you've covered a lot of things today already in a very short period of time. I want to ask you, what's one of the most important life lessons you've learned that you want to share today that you would like people to have as a takeaway from this, and want to come back to listen to the Wall of Fire program, because I think that's going to be a fantastic show.
Oh, it will be. I mean, there's just incredible insights that are part of my Wall of Fire story. And I want to just kind of bait the hook here for that on the Wall of Fire story. As I realized I had to either, shrink from the opportunities that are part of being a military spouse, or was I going to go through that Wall of Fire? It was really a momentous realization to me as to, I knew when I chose to be an Army wife that the day would come where I was going to have to give up, go away from family, go away from friends, and accompany him wherever the military sent me. But I didn't understand that I was going to find my why in that moment, and that will be the next part of the story, Wall of Fire. It's really, really important. But one of the most important things that I've learned overall is, and there's another story, I don't know if you remember it in the interview you heard on my Jeremiah story.
Yes.
But I have a very powerful Jeremiah story that occurred when I was in the Sultanate of Oman, and I was alone. And that's a whole different conversation, too. But it's a very powerful revelation that came to me that really is my driving force. And it was so overwhelming for me at the time that I've sort of hidden out with the knowledge that I needed to go forth and share all of these things that I've learned. But it seems I was so afraid. It just seemed so huge. It was overwhelming. I didn't know what I'd do about it. The most important thing I've learned, Jeff, is that it's not about me. It's about adding value to others' lives.
That is so true.
And when I look at it that way, how can I not do it?
Right.
How
exactly.
can you not do it?
Exactly.
Why would you not share these incredible insights and lessons learned, and to do it in a way that is values-based, helping people to go through really values process to determine what are your core values? What is it that you will not waver on?
Right. What will you not compromise on? You won't compromise on those.
No compromise. No compromise. And then become a servant leader. That's the other piece of it. Is how can I serve others? That becomes your purpose.
Absolutely.
How can I serve others and add value to others? And then one of the newest things that I've learned that I love and I want to share and I'm passionate about is the difference between success and significance.
I was just going to ask you that. Now, we only have a few minutes left, and I have 2 other questions for you. So if you could hit it real brief.
You bet.
Okay.
And, I didn't realize, I never thought about the difference between success and significance before. But when it came to my awareness was when we were down in Guatemala. We went on a Guatemala transformational leadership mission down last June. And at the end of all that we had done that week, and it was just, we went to transform a nation to begin a process of transforming that nation. And but at the end of the week, we were transformed by the experiences of sharing and teaching and giving to these people from our own knowledge and experience. But what I realized, and John made a statement that stopped me dead in my tracks. This was the last night. He said, once you have tasted significance, success will never be enough.
Isn't that amazing?
I thought, oh, my God.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking a lot about that, and what I realized is that success is about me. You know, it's setting goals, it's achieving goals, it's when you fail, it's turning around and saying, okay, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How could I do it better next time? That's success. You know, that's going up sort of that ladder of success and setting goals, and then once you reach a certain level, setting other goals and really taking time to reflect and evaluate and then make a plan going forward. But significance is about them.
Yes.
It's about others.
Yes.
It's about adding values to others and being a servant leader and really transforming not only your own life in the process, but transforming other lives, you know, that you touch. And there is nothing. That is legacy.
I hear you. We have less than a minute. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way, and how can they find you?
All right. Tell them, please, to go to my website, and it's DorothyBonVillain.com. And I also have a page that is more specific to military wives, and it's DorothyBonVillain.com/military-wives.
Thank you.
I also have...
Go ahead.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
I also have LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube, of course, Grand Canyon for the Wally. We're doing a much larger mission right now with some colleagues, and we're setting up a 501c3 for military family appreciation, and that's a really exciting thing too, but we don't have time for it right now.
No, we've got to go. Our time is up. I really, really am very thankful that you were here. Thank you so much, and we'll be talking soon. Have a great day. Happy 4th of July. God bless America. That's our show today. Remember, you have the power to live intentionally. I'm your host, Jeff Heiser, and I hope you will join me here again next week. Till then, stay safe, be intentional, and spread the word. Success is an intentional lifestyle.